As an artist known for my brightly colored acrylic paintings, I really know how to make colors pop. So if you've made a painting that's dull and the colors just aren't what you really wanted them to be, not to worry, because I'm going to show you how to fix it in this video. I'm going to share 5 techniques. These are things that are very easy to use. They're applicable to all skill levels, but this is going to help you understand how to better use color, and that way you can get the colors in your painting, the current one and the future paintings that you're doing, to be exactly the way you want them to be. First tip centers around the type of paint you're using, specifically the quality of paint. There's all sorts of different grades of acrylic paint. There is the craft paint, which I would highly suggest not using. Craft paint will lead to dull colors when the colors are mixed together. And so if you are using that cheapest, like it's a cost around $1 for a little bottle of it, if you're using that kind of paint, that could be the reason your colors are turning out dull. So what I would suggest is to use a student grade paint, something like Liquitex Basics or Dick Blick Studio Acrylics. And if you can afford it, it's even better to upgrade to the Liquitex paint or the Golden. Another thing you can do is mix your paint with gloss gel medium. You can use any of the consistencies. This is a heavy gloss gel from Golden, but you can use any type of gloss gel medium from Liquitex, or really any brand for that matter. But the main idea is to mix your paint with the gloss medium, because it will increase the saturation and vibrancy of your colors. And all of the supplies that I just discussed, they're linked in the description. So if you want to figure out what is best to use, they're all down there for you to check out. Another thing about acrylic paint is that it can dry differently than what it looks like when it's wet. And what I've found is that especially when you're using the cheaper versions of paint, so this is like the craft paint or even the student grade paint, it will likely change more from what it looks like wet to when it's dry. But oftentimes when you upgrade to the more professional paint, it will look the same on your palette or very close to the same as it will when it's dry. Now there's one exception to this, and this is if you are using something that's a really light color and you're putting on really light layers of it. So let's say you have a dark color down on your painting and then you put a very light layer of yellow. It doesn't really matter what grade of paint that you use, it will end up darkening up some, because that transparency in the light layer of paint is not thick enough to be able to cover up that darker layer underneath. And so if you are encountering a situation where you're trying to cover up something really dark on your painting, it's a good idea to use a very thick layer of paint or do multiple coats on top of that area, so that way you are going to get the opaque coverage that you're looking for. This next tip is all about color theory. Now, if you're trying to get your colors to be brighter and really pop, then the best way to do it is to put complementary colors next to each other when you're painting. If you're unfamiliar with what complementary colors are, they are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So like yellow and purple, red and green, and blue and orange. And these colors, if you set them side by side, will almost vibrate if you paint them in their most saturated form directly out of the tube of paint. So if you've not added like white to it or gray to it to make the colors more muted or lighter, if you've just taken this really saturated paint right out of the tube, stuck it on a white canvas side by side, those colors are going to be as bright as you could ever get any color. And this is one of the things that I absolutely love about using color in paintings, because you can make these colors even brighter looking by painting the area around it a little more muted. So this would mean by adding gray or adding a little bit of the opposite color on the color wheel to your paint to make it a little bit more dull. Now, I know when you're watching this video, you don't necessarily think about wanting to purposefully make your paintings dull. I mean, you're wanting to make your colors bright. But the thing is, if you have some areas of your painting where the colors are not very saturated, and then other areas of your painting where they're super saturated, as vibrant as you can get them, that contrast is going to create interest in your work and make those really vibrant areas pop out and create amazingly beautiful focal points. So these are just some things to consider when you're in the planning stage of your painting. But if you have a painting like right now that looks dull everywhere, what you might try to do is think to yourself, where is my focal point supposed to be? And then how could I add some layers of color on top of that area that would be at the opposite sides of the color wheel as the existing adding colors that are beside this area of the piece. For example, if you want the eyes to really pop out in a particular painting, if the eyes are colored purple, then perhaps the area around the eye should have some yellow in it. Another thing that's really good to think about is the amount of contrast that you have in your painting. And so if your painting is just looking the same all over, like it doesn't have any really bright areas, no really dark areas, it's just all kind of like a medium tone, then it's going to look more dull even if your colors are fairly vibrant. One of the easy ways to fix a painting in this situation is just to add a little bit more dark paint to some of the dark areas in very strategic places that you want to have a lot of contrast in your piece. Another thing you can do is add some highlights. So add some white to particular areas that you want to have a highlight on them. This will create more contrast within your work, and it will help the viewer feel as though they're not looking at something that is so dull and lifeless. Last tip has to do with varnishing. You can increase the vibrancy of a painting by just adding a coat or two of varnish. Now, this works best with paintings that are just a little bit dull, not really super washed out. So you'll have to look at your painting and figure out whether it's just a little bit dull or whether it's like really, really bad. But if it's just a little bit dull and you want to brighten it up just a tad, then go ahead and add a layer of varnish. And if you don't know how to do this, check out this video. I show you the easiest way that I know to apply varnish. All right, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.